You are listening to Travel with the Backpacking Housewife podcast. I'm your host, Janice Horton, ex-housewife, empty nester, and normally nomadic world traveller who loves to discuss dreamy destinations all around the world, and in particular the pros and cons of midlife and senior travel, and about making the most of opportunities to travel in retirement, or what I like to call the golden age of travel. Welcome to episode 13. In which I'd like to share with you my 10 greatest travel experiences. Actually, trying to whittle down all the amazing experiences that I've had during the years since the backpacking husband and I decided to sell everything we owned to travel the world in our midlife, down to just 10 greatest travel experiences has been a delightful exercise in travel nostalgia after living in just one place and travelling nowhere due to the pandemic. I did a brainstorming session that resulted in a list of dozens of wonderful experiences. How could I not include our trip to the Grand Canyon, or the time that we travelled across 7 Mile Bridge to the Florida Keys, or exploring Singapore, or not shout out about the favourite countries of the 56 that we've explored to date, and include all the cities and the amazing places we've travelled to that are now embedded so very deeply in my heart. Well, I suppose because this list isn't about my favourite places. This list is about the top 10 greatest experiences that I've had while travelling. It's all about feelings and emotions, rather than locations and destinations. I have finally been able to whittle down through hundreds of amazing experiences, not even including climbing tropical jungle waterfalls or sailing on boats on the Caribbean or renewing our wedding vows in Las Vegas with Elvis. Somehow, I've managed to produce a list of my 10 greatest experiences to date, but you should know that they're not listed in any particular order of merit, and this is because every single one of them is chosen for that mind-blowing, pinch-me kind of feeling that each evoked. That when I was there, experiencing these things, I knew that without any doubt in my mind that I was living in a very special moment and a unique time in my life that would forever be special to me, and that's what's qualified them to be on this list. And when I'm old, if I'm able to achieve old age and still have my memories intact, then I'll be able to close my eyes and bring to mind those experiences because I so carefully and consciously imprinted them into my heart, those feelings in that special moment. Well, now that I've collated this list to date, I do know that I would definitely want to write about and expand upon each of these greatest experiences with you in much more detail on my website at thebackpackinghousewife.com at some point in the very near future. So look out for new posts, and why not subscribe to my mailing list on my website for newsy travel emails at thebackpackinghousewife.com. So here we go, my 10 greatest travel experiences to date. Number 1, volunteering with turtle conservation. There's a cluster of small and remote coral islands called the Perhentian Islands, about 10 miles off the northeastern coast of Malaysia. We took a 1-hour flight from Kuala Lumpur to Kota Bharu on the coast, and then a boat over to the islands to stay for a week in a small thatched hut on a half-moon-shaped white sand beach in a cove only accessible by boat, as the beach and the resort is totally surrounded by jungle. The resort on that beach is an eco-resort called Bubbles, and it's a 5-star paddy dive centre. Because Bubbles Resort is located on a nesting beach for endangered green turtles, they also have a turtle and reef experience and a conservation project that you can be part of during your stay. We stayed for a week. My backpacking husband was diving every day, and I was volunteering on the nesting turtle conservation. And I have to say that it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. As I say, the resort is a 5-star paddy dive centre, but it's not a 5-star holiday resort. It is in fact quite basic, in that it's unspoiled and laid back and relaxed, and the rooms are clean, but if you like a bit of luxury in your life, then maybe this is not quite the destination for you. The resort is also totally wildlife and turtle friendly, and it has a house reef. The beach is off limits after dark unless you're on the beach patrol, the spot for turtles coming ashore to lay their eggs. And there are only red lights allowed at night rather than white lights because turtles are unable to detect red light. During that amazing week, I saw monkeys and lemurs in the trees, lizards in the jungle. I got to swim in the warm, clear waters on a coral reef with tropical fish and with turtles. I got to go out on beach patrol at night to see huge nesting turtles come ashore under the moon to lay their eggs at the top of the beach. I got to see turtle nests erupting and hundreds of baby turtles emerging from the sand to run on their tiny flippers across the beach to the sea. I went to several lectures to learn about turtle conservation, and I was amazed to learn that female turtles are around 30 years old when they first return to the beach where they were born to lay their eggs. And also, I learned more about the important work being done at Bubbles with their turtle conservation and reef preservation projects. The experience for me was both life-changing and life-affirming. It's a week that I'll never forget because it was so truly special and extraordinarily memorable. I'll forever remember sitting quietly on the beach at night under a full moon on the cooling sand, listening to palm trees swaying and waves slapping on the shore, and huge turtle thwacking the sand with her flippers as she carefully excavated her nest in which she would lay around 100 eggs. And 3 months later, having been guarded against predators by the conservation staff at Bubbles, they would hatch into tiny newborn green turtles. You can read my full post on green turtle conservation in Malaysia on my website, where you can also see my photos and find links to find out more about the Bubbles Resort and the Turtle and Reef Conservation Programme. My second greatest travel experience was seeing orangutans in the wild in Borneo. While exploring in Malaysia, we travelled from Kuala Lumpur, that's KL, over to the rainforest city of Kota Kinabalu, KK, the capital city of Sabah and the gateway into Borneo. We were looking to experience orangutans in the wild. From KK, we travelled across country to Sandakan and to the Sepilog Orangutan Rehabilitation Centre in North Borneo. The centre, in a reserve of virgin lowland equatorial tropical rainforest, was set up by an Englishwoman called Barbara Harrison in 1964. And it was the first centre in the world to dedicate itself to the rehabilitation of orphaned orangutans that are now living within the reserve. The centre also provides care for dozens of other wildlife species. Some of the other animals which have been treated at the centre include sun bears, gibbons and elephants. I've read so much about the reserve, and I have great admiration for the important work that they're doing in the rehabilitation of orphaned and injured, often due to illegal logging and deforestation, and ex-captive orangutans that have been sometimes kept as pets. It was a big dream of mine to visit and see the successfully rehabilitated orangutans enjoying their life in the wild. On the day that we attended, at the Visitors Centre, I watched a short movie about the work done at the centre. I will admit to you that I actually wept with sorrow at seeing the film showing the harrowing circumstances that had led to some of the orphaned orangutans arriving at the centre. And then I wept with joy at seeing the care and the transformation that eventually would lead them to rehabilitation and the return to the wild. We walked through the rainforest trails, craning our necks in the hope of seeing orangutan, which means the man of the forest, high above us in the ancient tree canopy. And we spent time at the nursery, where the young orangutans are cared for and taught the climbing and foraging skills that they will need to live in the wild. Skills that they would have or should have learned from their mothers over a period of around 10 years, because orangutans spend the longest time, other than humans, accompanied by and learning life skills from their parents. Then in the afternoon, we made our way to the feeding platform where the rangers provide fruit and sugarcane to provide the rehabilitated orangutans with a free feed. And feeding times are at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Because the orangutans are wild, sightings are not guaranteed, but we were soon treated to a close-up experience with the orangutans when many suddenly appeared swinging in from the trees and branches to land on the platform and claim their sweet treats. It was wonderful. As well as the feeding station, the outdoor nursery is open twice a day, and this is where you can observe some of the young orangutans playing and learning in their various stage of rehabilitation through the Sepilog's Protected Specialist Program. Our day spent at Sepilog Orangutan Rehabilitation Centre was amazing and incredible. Next on my list is visiting the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities in Cairo. And as I record this, I'm aware that final preparations are being made right now for the opening of a new Grand Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And I get the shivers of excitement just thinking about it. The main galleries will hold over 12,000 exhibits, the Shrine of the Golden King Tutankhamun, a display of over 5,600 pieces, according to the report I'm reading here. News from Egypt is that the shrine's ceiling is going to be decorated with a winged sun, and a gate to the shrine shows inscriptions and texts from the Book of the Dead. And when I first saw the treasures of Egypt for myself and experienced walking around the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities in Cairo, which was first opened in 1902, I was so overwhelmed by it all that I actually burst into tears and sobbed with joy. We had hired a guide for the day to show us around the museum, the oldest archaeological museum in the Middle East, with the largest collection of pharaohic antiquities in the world, because we'd been warned that if you walked around it without a guide and you stopped to gaze even for a moment on each of the 120,000 fabulous exhibits, that you would not spend many hours in the museum, but many years. So our guide, Sharif, a qualified Egyptologist, marched us through the hallways and straight past the most incredible sights, the sarcophaguses and statues and unimaginable treasures of gold and jewellery. And Sharif insisted that we trusted him to show us all the things that we needed to see in the limited hours that we had available to us to investigate and explore the expanses of the museum. He was right, of course, because without him we wouldn't have been regaled with the fabulous and detailed history of each of the important pieces that he highlighted to us. And we might not have made it even into the highlights of the exhibition, the Golden King Tutankhamun room, in which I stood face to face with the king who had been crowned the King of Egypt aged 9 and who had abruptly died mysteriously at around the age of 18. I stood for several minutes in awe in front of his famous golden mask, and then I looked around to see all the treasures of his lifetime that had been uncovered by Howard Carter in 1922. This was the same mask and the very antiquities that I'd read about from books when I was a child. And this is why visiting the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities in Cairo was such a mind-blowing, incredible experience for me. And now, with the Grand Museum of Egypt soon to be opened at Giza, I'm excited for the new building, but I'm also very grateful that for one day in my life, I was able to see and to experience being inside the original, overcrowded, incredibly overwhelming original home to a collection of Egyptian treasures that I know I'll absolutely treasure forever. Next on the list, number 4, we're staying in Egypt. After exploring the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities in downtown Cairo, our guide Sharif drove us out of town and to the Giza Plateau on the edge of the desert to investigate the pyramids and the Sphinx. All were built during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom of Ancient Egypt, almost 4,000 years ago. And the Great Pyramid is the oldest of the ancient wonders, and the only one still in existence. My excitement knew no bounds. I was actually gasping aloud as I caught my first glimpses of the pyramids from our car. We parked up and we walked across the sand right to the base of the giant block structures, and we posed for lots of photos which Sharif absolutely insisted on taking of us. The best thing we did that day was to employ Sharif to guide us. He was so knowledgeable, not only on Egyptian history, but he also knew exactly where to take us for the best experience. He spoke discreetly to the pyramid guards, and somehow he managed to convince them to let us take our small camera into the pyramids when there was a big sign saying no cameras inside. And I'm guessing we only got away with it because there were not many tourists on that day. Did I mention that it was hot? It was over 40 degrees centigrade. Squeezing into the narrow shaft and climbing down into the pyramids, all the way down to the crypts at the bottom, I imagined felt akin to being baked in a pizza oven, but of course it was worth the sweltering discomfort and the feelings of claustrophobia to be so deeply inside the pyramid. Although I would have hated to have been there when it was busy with lots of visitors, as the narrow shaft only allows for one-way traffic. And if seeing the pyramids and the Sphinx at Giza wasn't enough, our guide Sharif arranged for one of the guards at the plateau to open a locked wooden door at the bottom of some steps in the sand. And this allowed us entry into what Sharif described to us as the engineer's tomb. The secret tomb was, we were told, a gift from the pharaoh to his chief engineer, an eternal resting place for him and his family. And as we waited in great anticipation for this wooden door to the chamber to be unlocked, I saw rows of perfectly preserved hieroglyphics on the stone above the door. And to say I was excited was an understatement, as it was quite clear that this crypt was not normally open and available to tourists. Inside the crypt it was low and narrow and deep, with stone columns decorated with more perfectly preserved hieroglyphics holding up the roof. On the wall there were carved pictures and statues of the engineer and his entire family. It felt so very special and sacred to be inside this mausoleum. And even though I'm a writer, I don't really know how to find the words to explain to you how I felt that day, experiencing the ancient wonders of Egypt with my own eyes and touching them with my own hands. It was, and still is, one of the most special and emotional days in my entire life. Standing in front of the same sights and antiquities that I'd gazed at in the pages of Reader's Digest books as a child was, at times, just too much, and I spontaneously wept during the day with wonder and joy, simply because I couldn't contain my overwhelming feelings on being faced with such incredible history. And as well as exploring the museum in Cairo and the Giza Pyramid complex and the Sphinx Temple, we visited a papyrus museum, that's Egyptian reed paper, and we sailed down the Nile in a traditional boat called a felucca. Clearly, I have to write a whole post on my website at thebackpackinghousewife.com on our Egyptian experience so that I can go into more detail about what I saw and to be able to show you all my photos. Number 5 on my list is living on a Caribbean island that was hard to leave. And this is about when we first set off on our travels. We went to explore the islands of the Caribbean, and as you can imagine, it was fabulous. We eventually found ourselves in the Eastern Caribbean, in the Bay Islands just off the coast of Honduras, Central America. The smallest of the 3 inhabited islands is called Utila, and I wrote about it in my post on my website at thebackpackinghousewife.com, and the post is called A Secret Place in the Caribbean. It felt to us like not too many people knew about it. It felt like we'd discovered a secret place. A tiny tropical island paradise sitting on the Mesoamerican reef, which is the second largest coral reef in the world, tucked away in a sheltered bay where the water is warm and clear. There's a song on YouTube about Utila, and the verse includes, "When you come to Utila, you'll never want to leave." And the first time we visited Utila, we stayed for 6 months. We left a few days after the first 3 months, as required by our visa on arrival stamp, but then we went straight back again, simply because we really didn't want to leave. I remember how we'd arrived to find the house we'd rented double booked, but we didn't stress about it. We soon found a room to stay in for a couple of nights, and then we found another place to rent. A little Caribbean-style house on stilts, with a porch, near to the beach. And during those blissful 6 months, the scuba diving backpacking husband did his PADI dive master course at a dive shop called Gunter's Eco Marine. And the people there so warm and friendly, even to middle-aged travellers like ourselves, that they soon became friends and family. And the dive shop on the dock soon became our second home. Days were spent diving, well, that was the backpacking husband, writing romantic adventure novels on the porch of our little house, or reading in the hammock under the mango tree, that was me. And then we also had many days out in boats on the reef, lazing around in the sun on the beach, drinking rum at beach bars into the evening with our lovely island friends. Island life was fun and fabulous, and so blissfully wonderful. I've heard Utila likened to the Key West of the 1950s. And it's true, the island has a kind of timelessness, but also an unpretentious, laid-back vibe about it. And over our years of travelling the world, we've been back to Utila many times, sometimes staying for the 3 months allowed on the arrival visa, and sometimes for 6 months with a visa run in the middle. It's not that easy to get to Utila from Europe. We usually factor in at least one overnight stopover in either the USA or Honduras. And it involves many flights, each plane getting smaller, until we eventually arrive on the island's tiny airstrip in a 4-seater Cessna. We were headed to Utila when the pandemic hit, and our plans for the summer of 2020 were put on hold. And it's the first place we plan to go back to in the early part of 2022, when travel becomes possible again. And I know that when we finally get back there, that we might never want to leave. So that concludes part 1 in my greatest travel experiences. I'm hoping that you'll come and travel with me here on Travel with the Backpacking Housewife podcast next week, when we'll look at the next 5 on my list. If you'd like to get in touch in the meantime to discuss your greatest travel experiences, I'd love to hear from you. I'm on Facebook as the Backpacking Housewife. I'm on Instagram as Janice Horton Writer. And if you're on Twitter, please do tweet me to tell me about your travel experiences at Janice Horton. That's JANICEHORTON. And come and travel with me here on Travel with the Backpacking Housewife podcast. Subscribe and follow for inspiring and informative new episodes each week, in which we'll be discussing ways to plan for and to prioritise travel and adventure in our lives and in our new future, in what is set to become a new and golden age of travel.